The story kicks off in 2025 when kaiju showed up out of nowhere, straight from space, and invaded Earth. Humanity threw everything it had at them: missiles, bombs, the most cutting-edge weapons in existence. Nothing worked. So, in full-on panic mode, every nation on the planet pooled their best scientists, military minds, and technology to build the Anti-Kaiju Defense Force, the ERDE. This elite unit managed to hold the monsters back, but the war dragged on with no end in sight. Then a kid showed up. That kid was Tetsuo, painfully shy, totally introverted, the type of guy who just disappears in a crowd, but an absolute, certified genius. One day he stumbled onto something wild, a robot staging a one-man protest, blocking the entrance to a lab, fighting for its right to not blow itself up. Tetsuo's dad, Kojika Yabusame, showed up and couldn't care less about what the robot had to say. The robot complained that it had been built for one purpose only: fly into space, ram a kaiju, and explode. And it argued with full conviction that it deserved to live. Kojika shot back that that was literally the whole point, and then got weirdly emotional about it, celebrating the idea that if they mass-produced more robots just like it, they wouldn't just wipe out the kaijus, he'd also be filthy rich. The scientists were whispering in the corners that the guy was buried in debt from his own research. Tetsuo watched the robot in silence, and deep down, felt genuinely sorry for the thing. Later, a kaiju attacked the city, and Tetsuo used the chaos as cover to go find the robot. One of the scientists came sprinting to Kojika, screaming that Tetsuo had climbed into the cockpit of the robot, the snowman. Kojika, though, barely blinked, just said with a completely straight face that Tetsuo would have to be a genius to actually pilot the snowman. But guess what? Plot twist. Tetsuo was exactly that, a full-blown genius. He skimmed the manual, figured out the controls, and took off. Shortly after, every news channel was reporting. Barely able to hide the shock, a 9-year-old kid had just taken down a kaiju in an experimental robot. Kojika, trying not to look bad, put on the classic proud dad performance and announced to the world that he'd be mass-producing more robots and joining the war effort. Meanwhile, Tetsuo was having a complete meltdown because the entire planet was staring at him at that exact moment. Like, the most unlikely introvert in human history had just become the greatest hero the world had ever seen. Over the next several years, Tetsuo kept taking down kaijus and became humanity's symbol of hope. 10 years later, the ERDE intergalactic cruiser was slicing through space, heading toward the final battle. Tetsuo was there, nose buried in a self-help book, trying to work through his shyness and make friends. A voice over the system announced that they were 40 minutes out from the final battle and ordered Tetsuo to board the snowman immediately. On his way there, 2 girls cheerfully greeted him and said they'd tune the snowman up to mint condition. But the second one of them lightly touched his chest. The guy completely short-circuited. He said something that made absolutely zero sense and bolted. He grabbed an oxygen helmet, ejected from the ship, and started yelling at the snowman, now named Yukio, to let him in. Yukio asked in the most bored tone imaginable whether Tetsuo was hiding from human interaction again. Tetsuo spiraled, admitting he was a total lost cause, that he could barely hold a conversation with a girl, and complained that he'd spent the last 10 years inside a robot, and his social skills were completely wrecked. Yukio tried to pump him up, telling him not to give up. But Tetsuo insisted that he couldn't even think about making friends until he finished all 777 steps of How Even a Kaiju Can Make Friends, written by Lonely Iwaki. Yukio decided that was officially the nerdiest thing he'd ever heard. Right then, Captain Mist patched through and ran them through the mission briefing. Once they arrived, they'd split off from the ERDE, push into the center of the horde, and fire the infinity laser, wiping out everything within a 60-mile radius. Yukio confirmed, cool as ever. Tetsuo, of course, froze up. All he had to say was, "Yes, ma'am," and completely bombed it. That's when Yukio spotted the horde. Everyone went dead silent, because it wasn't thousands of kaijus, it was millions. Even so, the commander launched the mission. Tetsuo snapped back into it, drew his swords, and charged straight into the kaijus, obliterating everything in his path. The entire crew got fired up and shifted into combat mode. The commander screamed that it was time to save humanity and ordered the infinity laser ready to fire. Everyone was pumped. This was the moment everything had been building to, but at the critical second, the laser just vanished. Dead silence. Total shock. The commander immediately called for Plan B. Hold the line and pull Tetsuo and Yukio back. But before anything could be done, the ship lost power, the shields went down, and the kaijus tore through the command cabin, killing everyone inside. Tetsuo and Yukio saw the explosion, and Tetsuo, with this eerie calmness, said the mission wasn't over yet, that maybe someone had survived. He told Yukio to keep shooting down kaijus, no stopping, until every last one was gone. But the kaijus didn't stop coming. Tetsuo was running on empty. Yukio was nearly destroyed. That's when Yukio made a call, to cut the kaiju numbers down as much as possible and give humanity a fighting chance. He was going to self-destruct. Tetsuo agreed, fully expecting to die in the blast too. The kaijus kept coming, and the two of them talked quietly in the middle of all the chaos. Yukio even found time to roast Tetsuo, pointing out that he was about to die without having made a single friend. Tetsuo said he didn't really care, as long as Yukio stayed with him until the end. Yukio asked if he was sure, and then Tetsuo remembered everything. How he had always been invisible to people, until the day he saved humanity and became a hero, alongside the snowman. How he had slowly learned, over time, to live with the ache of not having friends. And so he thanked Yukio for sticking by a loser like him through all of it. Yukio thought to himself, it was Tetsuo who had given him a name. Before that, he was just a bomb. Tetsuo noticed that Yukio was sad and understood what was about to happen. Yukio disabled the manual controls and said he was guilty of a crime. His crime? Taking advantage of Tetsuo's kindness, forcing him to live an abnormal life. No friends, just years of fighting kaijus. Tetsuo said none of that mattered and begged Yukio to give back the controls because he wanted to die there with his only friend. The countdown started. 10 seconds. Yukio thanked Tetsuo for giving him the chance to live and said he couldn't let him die. So he ejected Tetsuo. And in his final words, he said that his biggest dream was for Tetsuo to go back to Earth and live a normal life and make thousands of friends. Tetsuo cried, and he accepted his friend's wish, promising that he would. And then, Yukio exploded, taking everything around him with it. Tetsuo woke up to the sound of the capsule system informing him that cryosleep had been deactivated. He pulled up the map and saw he was in Japan, but he'd been in the cryo chamber for 8 years, and he'd already been off Earth for 2 before that, so he was 10 years older, an adult now. He wondered with a flicker of hope whether anyone would still want to be his friend. Since there were no external cameras, he decided to step out. He already pictured it, a crowd of fans, everyone rushing to meet him. But when he opened the door, his jaw nearly hit the floor. The world was completely frozen. Tetsuo concluded in that exact moment that he was so totally screwed, and that he was never going to make any friends. He stood there, kind of deflated, trying to wrap his head around how the entire world had frozen over in 10 years. Was it just Japan? He went back in to check the global map, and the entire planet Earth was white, all of it, covered in ice. Tetsuo started to spiral. Was this an ice age? Was civilization even still out there somewhere? He cried for a few seconds, and then just stared into the void for 22 straight hours. It was his stomach growling that finally snapped him out of it. Tetsuo remembered there were supply rations behind the capsule. He got up, stretched, and accidentally hit a button that triggered a recording. Yukio's voice filled the air. "Make lots of friends, Tetsuo!" He cried again, but the video gave him the strength to keep going. So Tetsuo threw on a coat, ate, grabbed his backpack and his self-help book, and with an unshakable determination, set off in search of people. After a few minutes of walking, he spotted an old man standing on top of an excavator. Pumped up, he tried to introduce himself, but being the complete introvert he still was, he stumbled over his words, tripped, and knocked into the machine. What Tetsuo didn't know was that the man was already dead, completely frozen solid, and the impact shattered him into pieces. Tetsuo paid his respects. Then he noticed the excavator. He tried to start it and, to his surprise, it fired right up. He drove it with a big grin on his face, because it kind of reminded him of piloting Yukio, and decided that an excavator was basically a must-have item for an ice age. He soon spotted a massive hole up ahead, and since finding people was the priority, figured there had to be survivors underground, where it was way warmer. He tried to call out, and nothing came out, not even a peep. He squirmed with frustration. There was no way he could ever yell into a crowd of strangers, absolutely impossible. That's when a kaiju showed up out of nowhere, drooling, looking at Tetsuo like he was a free lunch. Tetsuo floored the excavator, hollering that he could not believe there were still kaijus in this world, and ended up driving straight off the edge and falling into the crater. By some miracle, he survived a drop of over 150 feet without a scratch, and realized he'd landed right in the middle of the city where he grew up, now completely frozen over. His mood dipped a little, and to make things worse, the ground started shaking. The kaiju had come down after him, but Tetsuo was done running. He decided he was going to take down a 60-foot kaiju with nothing but a mini excavator. He floored it straight at the creature, using the machine's claw to block its bites. He noticed that every one of the kaiju's attacks came in a straight line. You could block or dodge all of them, but the claw couldn't take the punishment and broke apart, leaving behind a small, jagged spike. Tetsuo realized he could actually deal real damage now. He went for it, charged straight in, went right through the kaiju's mouth, and drove the spike clean through its brain. The kaiju dropped dead. That's when 3 people appeared and noticed the fallen kaiju. The little girl got hyped because they'd found a whole kaiju in one piece. The man commented that the dismantling crew was going to lose their minds with excitement, and the white-haired girl went absolutely wild because they'd just hit the jackpot on meat. Then Tetsuo climbed out through the kaiju's mouth, completely drenched in blood, and came face to face with the 3 of them celebrating. Dead silence. Tetsuo was thrilled to have found actual humans, but the humans started screaming, convinced he was some kind of monster. The man and the little girl shoved the woman in front of them as a human shield, calling Tetsuo an evil spirit. The woman got into a fighting stance, and Tetsuo, who was just happy to be there and had absolutely no idea how to communicate like a normal person, smiled. A smile so wide and unsettling it looked creepy, which only made everyone even more suspicious. But then the exhaustion of the fight finally caught up to him, and Tetsuo passed out cold. When he came to, he was surrounded by a crowd of people efficiently stripping the kaiju down to the bone. He lit up when he saw there were still plenty of people around. He decided this was the perfect moment to make some friends, but then realized he was tied up. He just casually dislocated his arms to move them forward. Meanwhile, the squad leader, Nishimura, was congratulating Ao for finding a whole kaiju, pumped about everything they'd managed to get out of the creature. At Ao's request, he promised not to report that she was the one who found it. He knew she was someone important and didn't want to mess up the off-books explorations she'd been doing. Ao said, flat out, that she'd do whatever she wanted with her own life. Nishimura got emotional when he realized the little girl he'd once found crying had grown into such a strong and capable woman. That's when Ao's 2 friends showed up to tell them the suspicious kid had disappeared. The suspicious kid, Tetsuo, was standing back and watching the people work, slowly putting together that, in this new frozen white world, humanity had figured out how to survive by using every part of the kaiju as a resource. He cried from the sheer emotion of it. A little boy noticed and tried to cheer him up. Tetsuo tried to touch the kid's shoulder and froze. The boy ran off, calling him a weirdo. That's when Tetsuo spotted a massive icicle breaking loose directly above the kid's head, and he sprinted for him. Realizing he wasn't going to reach him in time, he grabbed a piece of kaiju bone and smashed the icicle before it could hit the boy. The kid's dad saw everything. He ran to his son, pulled him into a tight hug, and lovingly told him he was an idiot. A pair of twins came over and thanked Tetsuo for saving the kid, but they were thrown off because they'd never seen him around before. They kept staring, feeling like they'd seen that face somewhere. Tetsuo tried to speak, but the fear of rejection made him lock up again. The kid's dad smacked the twins on the back of their heads and said it didn't matter where Tetsuo had come from. Someone who saves a life like that is a good person, period. The man introduced himself as Takimura, said his son's name was Joji, and thanked him from the bottom of his heart. Nervously, Tetsuo extended his hand. Takimura shook it firmly, and for the first time in his life, Tetsuo said his own name to another person. Takimura told him to wait right there. He was going to grab the finest cuts of the kaiju as a thank you. Tetsuo was over the moon. He'd done it. His first real social interaction in his entire life. Meanwhile, Ao and her friends watched from a distance. Furumachi asked whether they should just grab Tetsuo, but Ao said their goal was to identify threats to the mall. And watching the genuine joy on Tetsuo's face, she decided they'd hear his side of things first. That was exactly when a giant hand reached down and grabbed the dead kaiju's head. Tetsuo's mouth fell open, because the kaiju standing in front of him had humanoid arms, something he had never seen before. Not in any battle, not in any file, nowhere. Tetsuo's mind flashed back. Every kaiju he and Yukio had ever taken down had a completely different skeletal structure. And now, out of nowhere, some guy loses it and starts screaming his head off, which gets the kaiju's attention, and it squashes him like he's nothing. Tetsuo takes a slow breath and tries to think of a way out. He knows that without Yukio, he's just a regular guy. No mini excavator, no weapons, and trying to go toe-to-toe with a kaiju barehanded? Bro, that's literally a death wish. So he thinks about asking the people around him if anyone knows how to fight the thing. But then Tetsuo looks around and sees exactly what he expected. Everyone completely paralyzed with fear. Frozen. Checked out. He had always been humanity's hero, and he desperately wanted to save these people. But how was he supposed to do that now? Then another guy completely loses his nerve and bolts like an idiot, drawing the kaiju's attention. But Ao, being the hero she is, snatches him out of the way just before he gets crushed. Then she drops to her knees and presses her forehead to the ground in total remorse, saying she can't forgive herself for not saving the man who got killed right in front of her. Furumachi and Asuka walk up saying everything's ready. Ao, fuming, yells at them to start it. They flip the switch on the emergency smoke machines, and it's clear they'd already prepared for exactly this kind of situation. Smoke floods the entire area, cutting off the kaiju's line of sight. Then, megaphone in hand, Ao screams at the top of her lungs, "Everyone run! You idiots!" Everyone takes off and starts climbing the ice wall toward the surface. Tetsuo feels a wave of relief seeing that these people were already prepped for something like this. But when he turns back to the kaiju, every bit of experience, every instinct he had built as a kaiju killer fires at once, like a full-on Spidey sense moment. He can feel that the creature is about to do something that could get everyone killed. But faced with something that massive, Tetsuo wonders what he can possibly do without Yukio. Takemura notices Tetsuo hasn't moved and calls out to him, and that's when it clicks for Tetsuo. The people he just met are in serious danger. So, without thinking twice, he takes off toward the kaiju, drawing its attention, buying everyone else enough time to reach the surface. Ao watches what Tetsuo is doing and can't figure out why he'd risk his own life like that. As Tetsuo runs, the kaiju smashes through an ice wall, and the debris flies everywhere, slamming into him. Takemura tries to go back for Tetsuo, but his friends hold him back. Ao sprints to help him, but a massive chunk of ice crashes down right in front of her, blocking the way. But Ao doesn't quit. She climbs it, and when she reaches the top, she sees that Tetsuo has been grabbed by the kaiju, who looks pretty happy about it. Like nice, a human snack. But then, the ice ceiling above cracks open, and a capsule comes screaming down, slamming into the kaiju's arm and saving Tetsuo from certain death. Now we rewind just a little bit, and we find out that capsule is none other than Yukio. Before self-destructing, he had transferred his entire consciousness and all of his data into the capsule. But it took way longer than expected to reboot the system. And when he finally came back online, he locked onto Tetsuo instantly, launched toward him, and the moment Tetsuo's vitals triggered a critical alert, Yukio arrived like a wrecking ball, blowing through everything to get to his partner. Then Yukio shifts into Combat Mode 1, the Snowball. A simpler form, but still absolutely lethal against kaijus. And Tetsuo just stands there, wide-eyed, because right in front of him is his very first friend, the one he thought he'd never see again. The kaiju, now pissed off, lunges at both of them, but Yukio dodges fast, fires his rockets, and launches himself at the creature head first in a devastating charge that sends the monster crashing down. Ao finally breaks through to the surface, and the sky opens up above them, like a sign of hope for everyone. Then, hearing the voice of his first friend, Tetsuo breaks down in tears of relief and pure joy, welcoming Yukio back, very much alive. In that moment, everyone on the surface notices the kaiju has stood back up, but this time, completely unhinged with rage. They're all trying to figure out where that robot came from and who that crazy kid down there even is. Yukio looks the kaiju dead in the eye and says it flat out. No kaiju that goes up against Tetsuo, and Yukio walks away from it. But he also takes the opportunity to give Tetsuo a solid chewing out for trying to face a kaiju with absolutely nothing. Like, bro, what was the plan? Yukio makes it clear that the capsule he's in right now is basically a stripped-down version of himself with arms. Technically, he's weaker than a prototype. Tetsuo gets anxious because he knows that if they take even one hit from this kaiju, it's over for both of them. But Yukio tells him to relax and promises they'll figure it out together. The people on the surface are trying to figure out if Tetsuo is literally having a conversation with the robot, and Ao tells everyone to shut up. Then the kaiju snaps into full beast mode. It drops into what Yukio calls a predator stance, loading power into its front legs and neck, coiling up for a devastating charge. Yukio shouts at Tetsuo to brace himself, and the kaiju launches. But Yukio dodges it at the very last split second, and the impact is massive. The kaiju wheels around toward Yukio, who tucks Tetsuo inside the cockpit. In a completely calm voice, Yukio says, if they had taken that hit, it would have been the end. The kaiju winds up for another charge, and Tetsuo warns that there's no way they'll be able to dodge this one. Everyone on the surface is freaking out, saying this kaiju is on a whole other level. But Nishimura, getting emotional, tells them it's going to be okay, because he's seen this before. The kaiju charges, and in a fraction of a second, Tetsuo ignites the laser sword. He sidesteps the kaiju with surgical precision, spins his body, uses the momentum, and decapitates the creature in one single clean stroke. Done. Everyone on the surface absolutely erupts, cheering, hugging, pure relief flooding through the crowd. and Ao's eyes light up like they never have before, because she saw every bit of it, crystal clear. She breaks it down out loud. Tetsuo struck the kaiju mid-spin and used the momentum to decapitate it, and she is completely floored, because even with the kaiju moving at that insane speed, Tetsuo had calculated everything perfectly. Meanwhile, over 60 miles away from the battlefield, on top of a building in Tokyo, a highly evolved humanoid kaiju is dangling its legs off the edge, completely unbothered, soaking up some sun, surrounded by snow on all sides. Later, Tetsuo and Yukio carry the defeated kaiju and the people with them toward the Survivor Center. Yukio says he's blown away by how much the world has changed in just 10 years. Tetsuo agrees, admitting he nearly lost his mind when he thought he was completely alone on the planet. And right then and there, Tetsuo breaks down crying. Relieved beyond words that Yukio is alive, he says he genuinely thought he'd spend the rest of his life completely alone. Yukio tells Tetsuo to cut it out, or he's going to start crying too. But Yukio can't hold it together either, and bursts into tears right alongside him, oil streaming down his face like actual tears. While the two crybabies completely fall apart from sheer happiness, everyone else is going absolutely nuts over the insane amount of meat they scored from taking down that kaiju. Asuka tells Ao that Tetsuo's robot is seriously impressive, but when she turns around, Ao has just vanished into thin air. Ao appears out of nowhere right in front of Tetsuo, leaving Yukio completely baffled about how she even climbed up there without anyone noticing. But he decides to let it go, saying this is actually a perfect opportunity for Tetsuo to work on his social skills. To hype him up, Ao gives Tetsuo a can of pineapple as a gift, explaining that in today's world, sweets and fruit are insanely rare. But the second she cracks the can open, that sweet, incredible smell hits the air, and Ao completely loses it, wanting to eat it herself. Even though it's a gift for Tetsuo, he notices how she's barely holding herself together, and asks if it's really okay for him to eat it. Ao bites her lip and tells Tetsuo to just eat it already before she completely snaps. She says that since Tetsuo saved everyone's lives, it's her responsibility to pay him back, even if it means giving up something worth more than her own life. Tetsuo hesitates to eat something more valuable than a person's life, but he knows he has to accept Ao's kindness, so he eats the pineapple right in front of her face. Ao is absolutely dying inside, but keeps it together, repeating to herself that it's a gift for Tetsuo. The dude freezes up, terrified he made the wrong call. Then Yukio suggests they share the rest of the pineapple together, but before he even finishes the sentence, Ao is already on board. They eat together and give thanks for the meal. Then Ao says she didn't just come by to give him the pineapple. She also came to introduce herself and share some information. She introduces herself as Ao Nogi, and thanks Tetsuo and Yukio for saving everyone. Tetsuo introduces himself too, and realizes this is the second time he's managed to introduce himself to someone without completely short-circuiting. Like, that used to be literally impossible for him. Then Ao says it's time to talk about what happened 10 years ago. Tetsuo is caught off guard, but steels himself and tells her to go on. Ao explains that 10 years ago, somewhere in Japan, an absolutely terrifying humanoid kaiju appeared. But unlike regular kaijus that came from space, this one rose from the sea accompanied by an enormous white floating sphere. Then the spheres started multiplying. They rapidly closed in on cities all across the planet, and in the blink of an eye, they exploded, unleashing a freezing wind that devastated the entire world, freezing everything solid. The planet has never warmed back up since. Tetsuo realizes this all went down right after they left for space to fight the kaijus. He asks Ao if she knows what happened to the anti-kaiju defense force. Ao says that since everything happened so fast, the defense force took catastrophic losses in the very first wave, and that the few who survived pushed themselves to the absolute limit trying to protect people. But it didn't take long for the rest of the kaijus to rain down from the sky and wipe out what was left. Even so, Ao mentions there are rumors that the defense force is still operating and that some members might still be alive. That gets Tetsuo and Yukio fired up, filling them with hope that they might actually find them. Shortly after, Ao lets Tetsuo know they're approaching the Survivor Center. Just the simple fact that someone is calling him by name already makes the dude incredibly happy, because it means he's actually making real progress on this whole socializing thing. And then, they finally arrive at a school in the center of Mishima, the last place where, in Ao's words, you can sleep peacefully and stay warm. People start spreading the word that the Savior and the Snowman are back, and with a ton of kaiju meat. And Tetsuo's dream of being welcomed with open arms by a crowd of people finally comes true. Completely flustered, he raises both arms, like the legendary savior and hero he is. Then Ao explains that around 200 people live there, and each one has a role. They've set up several departments. the materials department, the daily life department, which handles cooking and quality of life, the dismantling squad, and so on. Tetsuo thinks it's all incredible and asks Ao which department she belongs to. With a little smirk, Ao says she's in accounting. Then Furumachi throws an arm over Tetsuo's shoulder, making the total nerd cringe with embarrassment, and explains that Ao was put in accounting because there was absolutely no way she could be allowed to leave, and yet she keeps sneaking out anyway. Then Ao spots the elders absolutely seething, waiting for her. With no way out, she calls her ride or die crew over to take the epic scolding together. But before the scolding, Ao tells Tetsuo that Takimura himself asked to look after him. Tetsuo is cool with that, and Takimura says his first order of business is taking him to his personal sanctuary. The dude is then brought to a hot spring. Tetsuo sinks into a warm, relaxing bath, one of his biggest goals ever since he got back to Earth. But then he realizes there were no hot springs in the center of Mishima, and that when they came down to the school, that was the only place with no snow. Takimura notices Tetsuo's confusion and says he'll clear everything up. He explains that buried beneath the center of Mishima is a kaiju. Tetsuo visibly tenses up, but Takimura puts him at ease and asks him to just listen to the story of the kaiju tamer who saved them all. Takimura explains that 11 months after the Great Freeze, he was leading a group of survivors in search of a school to use as a base, but every single one they found was already kaiju territory. The survivors used malls and schools as shelters, but whenever kaijus got close, they ran. Then one day, on the verge of starving to death, someone found the carcass of a kaiju and brought it back as a last resort. Obviously, driven by pure desperation, everyone ate it, and as a result, half the survivors died from rejecting the alien flesh. Only the lucky ones, whose bodies didn't reject the extraterrestrial meat, made it. Takimura and the few who remained kept wandering until the next school, but ran straight into another kaiju. And to make things worse, Ao started showing the symptoms of someone rejecting the meat. Some people suggested leaving her behind, but Takimura and his wife would never in a million years do that, and decided to fight the kaiju with everything they had. Unfortunately for them, 2 kaijus closed in and surrounded them. And fortunately for the survivors, the 2 kaijus broke into a territorial battle, but in the middle of all the chaos, the teacher accidentally dropped Ao, and she ended up lying there between the 2 creatures. Takimura and his wife desperately wanted to go save her, but were held back by everyone else, who insisted it was basically suicide to even try. The poor girl lay there on the ground, coughing and suffering, but out of nowhere, Ao's hair turned white, and a mysterious voice started speaking to her. The voice called Ao pitiful for being abandoned by the people she loved, and said she would certainly be devoured by the kaijus. The voice said it was interested in something called emotion, feelings, something only humans have. So Ao poured her heart out to that voice, saying she didn't want to die in a place like this, that she wanted to go to school, wear a school uniform, fall in love, be happy, and that, since her parents were gone, she was completely terrified, and that she didn't want her last meal to be kaiju meat. "I don't want to die. I'm so scared, I'm so scared, I'm so scared." The voice feels an absolutely overwhelming rush hearing and feeling Ao's despair, especially because they're negative emotions. It says it wants all of that. Those emotions of despair, and especially the hatred for the people who abandoned her. But Ao catches the voice completely off guard, saying she doesn't hate the people who left her, because every single one of them was kind to her, and that she actually loves them, especially Mr. and Mrs. Takimura, who always shared food with the kids. "I love all of them, okay?" Ao then gets back on her feet, and like a true warrior clinging to life, even knowing she doesn't stand a chance against the massive creature in front of her, she declares she's going to protect everyone. The kaiju lunges to devour Ao, but at the very last second, the second kaiju lands a devastating blow on it, saving the girl. Then Ao realizes that the voice in her head was coming from the very kaiju that saved her, screaming that humans make absolutely no sense. The kaiju says that a small juvenile form of an insignificant human, referring to Ao, obviously, is incredibly fascinating. Then the kaiju activates a fire ability, something like a phoenix, and enters a kind of synchronization with Ao. She gains the kaiju's powers and her hair ignites in blue flames. The survivors are completely lost, with zero idea what just happened, and start calling Ao the kaiju tamer, the great savior. Ao thinks that fire feels warm and comforting, and is absolutely overjoyed. Then the kaiju tells Ao it will protect her and the humans, in exchange for knowledge and emotions. And so, Tetsuo is brought to the place beneath the school, where Ao's kaiju sleeps peacefully, warming and protecting all the survivors who call that place home. Meanwhile, 2 people are watching the humanoid kaiju from a distance. up on top of a building. Otoichi shows up calling the eye patch guy Colonel, saying he came to get him. He warns that if they get any closer to the kaiju, even their cold-resistant gear won't hold up. The Colonel, clearly tense, says they need to find a heat source, fast, and Otoichi immediately brings up the kaiju at the center of Mishima, Ao's kaiju. Staring at the creature from afar, the Colonel says he doesn't understand what the kaiju's goal even is, but makes one thing crystal clear. To save the world, they have to get rid of that thing. And right at that exact moment, the humanoid kaiju senses their presence. In no time, the building they're standing on gets attacked by 3 kaijus that look like giant worms, dude. The Colonel orders Otoichi to get ready for combat, and that's when we find out they're all part of ERDE, the Anti-Kaiju Defense Force. And there's more. Otoichi is literally standing on top of a kaiju, revealing that Ao isn't the only one who can bond with these creatures. Back to Tetsuo, he's completely blown away by the fire kaiju, but then he notices the thing kind of looks like a flaming chicken. Ao agrees, and explains that when the kaiju connected with her and gained consciousness, it was already in that form. But she mentions that when the kaiju first came to Earth, it didn't look like that at all. Ao calls out to the kaiju, who was just chilling and sleeping, and it basically tells her to pipe down. Takamura takes the opportunity to tell Tetsuo that he got lucky finding Ao, because without her, they'd have absolutely no clue what the kaiju is saying. They communicate through telepathy. The kaiju then lets out a steam burst that scorches Takimura's shorts right off. Ao explains that the temperature only stays under control when she's nearby, and asks everyone to stick close. She also mentions she can control the firepower a little, just like the kaiju can, and that if humans team up with kaijus, it might be the only way to adapt to this insane cold. And with a big grin on her face, she says she's going to protect everyone. But right after that, Ao makes sure to warn them that the kaiju is a total weirdo. Like, he doesn't move, just burns through energy heating up the center. And all he asks in return is that Ao reads him 1 book a day. She also mentions that the kaiju has dubbed himself Land of Men because of some weird book he really got into. The kaiju opens one eye and tells Ao to shut up. Again. A little later, Takimura takes Tetsuo to a room and tells him this is his new home. He explains it's just an old classroom with curtains, but that the center's administrators give bigger rooms to people with families, which means Tetsuo is now part of the Takimura family. He quickly clarifies that the other Takimuras are him, his son Joji, and his daughter. But before Takimura even finishes the introductions, Tetsuo pulls back the curtain and comes face to face with Takimura's daughter, Hagane, in her birthday suit, dude. Hagane screams in horror and grabs a wrench to beat that memory straight out of Tetsuo's head. Lucky for her though, Tetsuo didn't even fully process what he saw. He passed out on the spot. Later, Tetsuo wakes up and notices Hagane sitting nearby, totally red in the face, looking after him. He quickly introduces himself, showing he's grown a little bit in the social skills department. Tetsuo's weirdly chill reaction makes Hagane realize the guy genuinely doesn't remember a thing, which for some reason leaves her kind of disappointed. She tells him their dad went to work and asked her to look after him, and that he left a letter for Tetsuo. Tetsuo gets super pumped, because this is the very first letter he's ever received in his life. In the letter, Takimura asks Tetsuo to try to get along with Hagane and warns him not to let her go to her mother's workshop, because Hagane lost her mother in a traumatic way just 1 month ago. Hagane takes charge of the situation and invites Tetsuo on a tour of the center, but obviously she uses that as an excuse to take him to the best spot in the whole place, her mom's workshop. She explains that her mom was the head of the technology department and had her own research workshop, but now Hagane's been using it all in secret. Tetsuo thinks the workshop is incredible, which makes Hagane blush, but not out of crush energy. It's because it reminds her of how her mom always used to praise her for her inventions. Hagane then asks Tetsuo for his opinion on something she's been building. Meanwhile, the colonel and his crew are riding on top of a kaiju, carrying one of the eyes from the creatures they took down. Otoichi says they've gotten intel that to get close to the humanoid kaiju, they're going to need Ao's fire kaiju from the Mishima Center. He also mentions they received information that Tetsuo came back from outer space and was spotted at the center along with the robot. That catches the colonel off guard, but the guy doesn't look even remotely happy about it, growling that not even outer space could finish off Tetsuo. So the colonel makes it official. They're going after the fire kaiju and Tetsuo's robot, so that their team, Vierde, will be the ones to save the world. Later, Takimura comes home and notices Tetsuo and Hagane are completely wiped out. He finds it suspicious, and just as Tetsuo was about to spill everything, Hagane slaps her hand over his mouth and claims they just did a tour of the center. Takimura lets it slide and puts together a seriously solid dinner for everyone, but warns Tetsuo not to touch the kaiju meat. It can be pretty dangerous for someone who's never eaten it before. A little later, as everyone drifts off to sleep, Tetsuo can't close his eyes, because this is the first time in his life he's ever gone to sleep surrounded by friends. And not long after, Hagan cries, reliving the moment she watched her mother get devoured by a kaiju right in front of her eyes. Meanwhile, the kaiju that devoured Hagan's mother finishes off another creature and says excitedly that it's dying to eat another human. And that's when we find out this kaiju is actually bonded with one of the ERDE members, except the creature named Artemis doesn't follow the girl's orders and refuses to leave Mishima. But the commander says that's fine, that it's actually an advantage because Artemis is special. It can communicate telepathically in human language and relay information from a distance. The commander then asks the girl what Artemis reported. She says Artemis confirmed that Tetsuo is in Mishima, along with the kaiju Tamare. The colonel knows there are around 200 people sheltered at the center, and he's seething with envy. They not only have a continuous heat source, but also Tetsuo and his robot. A woman named Akagi asks whether they should wipe out all the survivors at the center. The colonel says first, they'll use them as hostages to kidnap the fire kaiju, and then kill everyone who doesn't belong to Vierdi. Then, nodding to the big bad wolf and the 3 little pigs, the colonel says he's going to huff and puff and blow those little straw houses down, and that the 6 wolves are already on their way. Meanwhile, Tetsuo and Hagani finish building her project. She's over the moon about it, and Tetsuo asks why she built it in the first place. Hagan dodges the question and asks him to kneel in front of her. Tetsuo doesn't find that weird at all and just kneels. Hagan says there's someone who always used to do that for her, and that she'd like to do it in their place, like a ritual kind of. So she starts gently patting Tetsuo's head and tells him he did a good job. Tetsuo sits there totally dumbfounded. Hagan gets super embarrassed and pulls her hand back, but notices that Tetsuo has completely frozen up and passed out cold. Then it hits her. She's the one who was always on the receiving end of those head pats, because it was her mom who always told her she'd done a good job. Hagan looks at what she built, and it becomes clear she's planning to do something very dangerous. Later, while they're eating dinner, Hagani glances over at Tetsuo sitting there, in her mom's old spot, but she doesn't feel anger or resentment. She feels like Tetsuo has always been part of the family. Even so, the sound her mother made when she became a kaiju's prey still echoes inside her head. Later that night, as everyone sleeps, Tetsuo wakes up and finds another letter waiting for him, which gets him excited. But as he reads it, he discovers that Hagani has gone after the kaiju that killed her mother. Meanwhile, Hagani is out there walking through the freezing cold. And to her bad luck, or maybe good luck, she almost immediately runs into the very kaiju that killed her mom. The creature remembers Hagan perfectly, because the last time it was about to devour her, Ao showed up with the fire kaiju and ruined everything. Hagane is terrified standing in front of that thing, but she quickly pulls herself together and actually thanks it for being so easy to find. Without wasting time on small talk, the kaiju unleashes a powerful attack, but notices that Hagani dodged it. She's using her newest invention, the glider boots, programmed with an AI evasion system that she and Tetsuo modified. But when they were working on the boots, Tetsuo made it very clear that they're only meant for evacuation, and that if an enemy comes at full force, they won't be enough. And since kaijus are heat resistant and regenerate fast, the weapon they built wouldn't be capable of taking one down. But Hagane went after the kaiju fully knowing she might not make it back. All she wants is to cause it as much pain as possible. So, with every memory of her mother flashing through her mind, she fires the missile, which explodes inside the kaiju's mouth and stomach, flooding the area with razor-sharp needles that dig into everything and leave the creature completely unable to eat ever again. Mission accomplished. Hagane breaks down crying from missing her mom, while the furious kaiju lunges to crush her. But at that moment, Yukio slices off the kaiju's arm and saves Hagani. The creature kicks up a massive cloud of dust and burrows into the snow. Tetsuo comes sprinting over and collapses on top of Hagani. She's still in a panic, breathing out of control. But Tetsuo steadies himself, tears streaming down his face, and tells Hagani she did a good job. Those words bring Hagani back to reality, and she starts crying, not because she got her revenge, but because of how much she misses her mom. Tetsuo understands everything she's going through without a word needing to be said. But right then, Yukio notices something absolutely terrifying coming in at full speed and screams at Tetsuo to get in the cockpit. And in the distance, it's the colonel and his kaijus firing projectiles that latch onto Yukio and detonate, blowing off one of his arms. But let's rewind a bit. 19 years ago, when humanity formed the ERDE in response to the kaiju threat, Sagami decided to enlist. The guy shot straight to the top, elite of the elite, best of the best. He even took down a kaiju solo with a single bazooka shot. Sagami got a standing ovation and was nicknamed the Savior. And that was rocket fuel. He kept getting deadlier, kept climbing the ERDE chain of command, and everyone worshipped him like he was literally humanity's last hope. And then, bro, it went straight to his head. His ego took the wheel and never let go. He stacked up awards and honors until his walls looked like a trophy room. But one day, while hanging up yet another plaque, the news on TV was covering a kaiju that got taken out by a robot piloted by a 9-year-old kid. And you know what really got under Sagami's skin? People on social media were calling this kid, some guy named Tetsuo, the savior of humanity. Over time, more and more robots were built as the go-to solution against the kaijus, and Sagami knew his run as the hero was over. The guy clearly despised robots and made zero effort to hide it. Fresh out of a simulation one day, he walked straight up to a scientist and made a point of saying he wasn't really convinced robots were all that effective against kaijus. Meanwhile, Tetsuo kept dropping kaijus left and right with his robot, getting more shine by the day, celebrated across the entire world as the savior of humanity. And Sagami was eating himself alive with jealousy, like completely consumed by it. Then one day, 3 kaijus showed up at once, and Sagami saw his shot, his chance to reclaim the spotlight as humanity's greatest hero. But in the middle of the fight, he ordered his men to fall back and charged in alone to take the kaiju down, only to crash and burn spectacularly. And right when he was about to get devoured, Tetsuo swooped in and obliterated the kaiju right in front of him. That sent Sagami over the edge. The man completely snapped and tried to open fire on the robot, but lucky for him, he was already out of ammo. After that day, Sagami had one thing on his mind: get promoted, and he pulled it off insanely fast, clawing his way to the highest seat of authority in the ERDE. And that's when he finally set his long game in motion. In a meeting with the ERDE's top brass, Sagami argued that they couldn't just leave humanity's fate in Tetsuo's hands alone. He threw the question out to the room: is there really only one savior? Then he pitched the idea of raising prodigy children to become the next generation of great saviors, declaring that he himself would serve as their captain and trainer. The plan got approved, and by 2030, Sagami was already molding the kids who would carry the torch after Tetsuo, the next generation of saviors, dubbed the Vierde. But then everything got derailed. The humanoid ice kaiju showed up and froze the entire planet. And the following year, the ERDE's final battle in space, led by Tetsuo, ended in failure. The name Vierde faded into obscurity. Sagami's plans looked dead in the water. But somehow, Sagami and those kids survived those brutal conditions and came out the other side stronger than ever. So now we're back in the present. Sagami, still burning with deep hatred for Tetsuo, has one of his students take control of the spike-shooting kaiju, which drives its spikes into Yukio and detonates them, blowing off one of the robot's arms. Sagami and his students watch from a distance, satisfied that they've just taken out Tetsuo's robot. Sagami says that now that the Mishima base has lost its most powerful weapon, he can move forward with the plan without any major roadblocks. He notices Yuma looking down since her kaiju is now out of the fight, and tells her that since her kaiju drew Tetsuo in, she did her job perfectly. But Yuma fires back. Now that her kaiju is dead, she's useless to him. Sagami tells her they are the Vierde, the torch of human salvation, and with that signature creepy look only he can pull off, tells her to stay behind him and that he'll protect her. Yuma gets all flustered, but Sagami makes one thing crystal clear. As for Tetsuo, he'll handle that one personally. Everyone starts laughing, already picturing Tetsuo in full panic mode. But right then, Tetsuo comes out of nowhere and slices off one of the reindeer kaiju's horns, only to freeze when he realizes there are people riding on top of the kaiju. So he decides he'll spare the humans and focus on taking out the kaijus, even with just a sword. Tetsuo moves in to deliver the killing blow, but Otoichi activates her kaiju's power and instantly teleports everyone back to their respective kaijus. Tetsuo is completely lost, unable to wrap his head around a kaiju that can teleport. Sagami hears Yukio's voice and immediately figures out that the snowman transferred his consciousness into that weaker robot. Tetsuo keeps trying to make sense of how the kaijus have powers. So Sagami drops some knowledge. There's a theory that humans only use 10% of their brain's full capacity, and that if you could unlock the other 90%, you'd be able to tap into supernatural abilities, or something like that. But Sagami makes it clear he doesn't buy it, explaining that even if you could somehow reach 100% brain usage, there's no way to force your body to do something it's physically incapable of doing. Not even a brain firing on all cylinders can produce supernatural abilities when it's stuck inside a regular human body. Then Sagami drops the bombshell. But what if a kaiju's body, one that can voluntarily reshape itself to adapt to any environment, were to link up with a human brain full of untapped potential? Sagami concludes that syncing with these creatures of extraordinary ability grants them access to supernatural powers, and he calls it instinct. Tetsuo then realizes that if what Sagami just said is true, every single kaiju standing in front of him has some completely unknown supernatural power. Sagami adds that the humans who connect to and control the kaijus are literally remote brains in the kaiju service, there to push it to its absolute peak. In other words, the kaijus are using humans to level themselves up. Hagane tries to wrap her head around who the heck these people are and why they're going against other humans. But through tears, she knows that even if they are human, what matters right now is that everyone is under threat, that the lives of all her friends in Mishima are on the line, and she simply cannot imagine how Tetsuo is supposed to deal with all of these powered kaijus at the same time. Meanwhile, Ao and his friends are out having a good time, but Ao suddenly gets a bad feeling. You know that gut feeling a mom gets when she just knows something's wrong with her kid? Exactly that. Sagami looks over at Tetsuo and pauses to think. And every single one of his instincts is screaming at him that if he goes head-to-head with Tetsuo right now, a lot of his beloved students are going to die. So, with his eyes rapidly scanning the situation, he decides to scrap the original plan. At the same time, Tetsuo fires up every instinct and every ounce of experience he has, and since he knows there's only one move to make, he makes it. He's going to wipe out every single one of them. Sagami feels Tetsuo's battle instinct kick in at that exact moment and orders Otoichi to get a code orange out to every pilot as fast as possible. She immediately relays it to everyone using her short-range matter transport ability. One of the girls receives the code orange and gets frustrated, insisting she could have taken Tetsuo down herself in about a second flat. Then the kaijus start moving toward Tetsuo. Ares, Eros, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, all of them charging in, and Tetsuo braces for the onslaught. But to his shock, the kaijus blow right past him, completely ignoring Tetsuo, stating that the mission objective comes first above everything else. In other words, fall back. But Tetsuo notices one stayed behind. Sagami, sweating bullets now, acknowledges that they wouldn't have lost if they'd fought together as a unit. But if they had kept going, 3 of his kaijus would have been lost. And since he considers himself a perfect being, now operating at a full 100% of his brain, Sagami says he doesn't make mistakes. Then he turns to Tetsuo and asks, "Where do you think that kaiju horde is heading?" Tetsuo, Yukio, and Hagane all clock it instantly. They're heading straight for the Mishima base. Sagami announces the kaiju's estimated arrival time is 4 minutes. And that's exactly how long Tetsuo has to finish him off and maybe, just maybe, save his friends from total annihilation. Tetsuo and Hagane go dead silent. And Sagami, absolutely loving every second of watching Tetsuo like this, nicknames him the Hesitant Warrior. But Tetsuo doesn't stay hesitant for long and launches himself at Sagami's kaiju. Only, in that same instant, both Tetsuo and Yukio get sent flying with a single hit, and Sagami, cool as ever, commands his kaiju, Hercules, to finish Tetsuo once and for all. Meanwhile, Yukio asks Tetsuo to drop the fight and go after the other kaijus before the enemy reaches the center of Mishima. But Tetsuo, he's dead set on fighting. Hercules launches an attack with his sword arm, but Yukio dodges it with insane agility. Tetsuo realizes that out of every kaiju he's ever faced in his life, this one was the strongest. So absurdly powerful that Tetsuo barely managed to react in time. Sagami looks at him with a smug little grin and asks whether he, the guy who showed up 10 years late to Earth, really thinks he can beat Hercules and protect his new little hideout. Sagami snaps his fingers and Hercules launches into a full combo. With an almost embarrassing amount of effort, Tetsuo can barely hold his ground. Then, completely desperate, he shouts at Yukio that it's time to bust out whatever secret weapon he's been sitting on. Yukio then unleashes his secret function number 2, a folding seat, and tells Hagane to sit down. Tetsuo, absolutely baffled, asks why in the world there is a folding seat inside the cockpit. Yukio explains, totally hyped up, that while they were developing the final form, he had asked Tetsuo's dad to build a cockpit that could fit multiple people, because he was 100% sure that Tetsuo was going to make a ton of friends during those 2 years in space, and that, without a shadow of a doubt, he would invite them to check out the cockpit. Then, while still blocking the kaiju's strikes, Yukio starts crying tears of joy, overwhelmed with emotion over Tetsuo finally bringing a friend into the cockpit. Hagane buckles up, and Tetsuo, seizing the opening, dodges the kaiju's sword, leaps onto the creature's back, and lands a devastating hit with his laser sword. The kaiju drops, a deep gash cut into its shoulder. But, unfortunately, Tetsuo couldn't dodge the kick that came right after. The robot shakes violently, and Tetsuo and Yukio reach the same conclusion. Sagami and Hercules are just on a completely different level. Pumped up over Tetsuo's near-certain defeat, Sagami is practically glowing, and takes the opportunity to show his students his absolute unit of a chest. Tetsuo looks over at Hagane, and the poor girl is crying, frustrated with herself for feeling completely useless in that moment. She says the enemy definitely has a plan, because every day at 3 in the afternoon is when Ao and his friends head out to explore the territory looking for new and useful things. That's the moment when the shelter is most vulnerable, and unless the kaiju tamer gives an order, the land of men will be dead asleep. Tetsuo takes it all in and concludes that he needs to take down that kaiju as fast as possible, but he knows the creature isn't going down easy. He focuses hard, trying to find a way out, but he knows full well that Yukio is running on fumes, and that brute force alone isn't going to cut it. So Tetsuo makes an unexpected call. He's going to ask Sagami directly why he wants to destroy the center. Yukio is speechless with happiness. He says this is the very first time in Tetsuo's life that he's decided to actually communicate with someone like that, as an equal, and that ever since coming back to Earth and meeting Ao and the others, Tetsuo has finally started breaking down the walls that always kept him from building real connections with people. Tetsuo believes that if he can understand what's going on inside Sagami's head, maybe he can find a way out. Yukio gives Sagami a thumbs up, and Sagami gets it immediately. It's the signal for a temporary truce. And then, for the first time in his life, Tetsuo speaks to another person without stuttering, without freezing up, without falling apart. He asks, with a steady voice, what Sagami's reasons are for doing all of this. Yukio spins with joy. Sagami answers that the variant that froze the planet is still in Tokyo, and that they, Vierde, are going to destroy it. To do that, they need to borrow the fire kaiju. While Sagami talks, Yukio picks up on something off, a gut feeling that something is very, very wrong. He starts wondering if Tetsuo is making a massive communication blunder. But Tetsuo gets excited because, as the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So he tells Sagami that if that's the case, they can work together. Sagami agrees, and Tetsuo breaks into a wide grin. But Sagami says there's one tiny little problem. Yukio realizes in that exact moment that letting Tetsuo have his first ever conversation with an enemy was a catastrophic mistake. And then Sagami lets it rip, loud and clear. "It's so unfair!" Sagami screams that Tetsuo always steals the spotlight, that there isn't a single day he doesn't pray for this guy's downfall, and then, completely losing it, Die! 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 Being treated like that, the very first time Tetsuo pushed through his own walls to open up to another person, it hit like a truck. Tetsuo froze, traumatized. Hercules charged in, but Tetsuo, on pure autopilot, started defending himself mechanically. Unfortunately, he was completely out of it, feeling things he had never felt before. Hercules showed no mercy during that moment of weakness, landing a devastating blow on Yukio and seriously damaging the frame. It stomped again and again relentlessly, but Tetsuo was still trapped in Sagami's words, screaming desperately at Yukio to run. Yukio fires up the thrusters and blasts into the sky, but Hercules leaps fast and catches Yukio off guard. After years of dropping kaijus without even blinking, Tetsuo feels something he had long forgotten. Real fear. Actual fear of a kaiju. All he can do now is cry. The kaiju winds up for the finishing blow. Then, to save Tetsuo and Hagane, Yukio locks out the controls, pushes his thrusters past the limit, and headbutts Hercules hard enough to rattle your teeth, then bolts as fast as he possibly can. Sagami loses his mind, screaming at Hercules. As they flee, Yukio apologizes to Tetsuo, explaining that he had to take control. Tetsuo, feeling like the world's biggest failure, apologizes for being so useless. Through tears, he says that someone like him has no business letting his guard down like that and trying to have a conversation with anyone. He says he thought he could work things out by just talking, but that he was a complete idiot. He thought he'd grown, that he could finally actually communicate, but he was wrong. He calls himself an idiot, says he's always been an idiot. He thought he had changed, but in the end, he always ruins everything. But Yukio isn't having any of it. Yukio states with everything he's got that Tetsuo is completely wrong. That all of this happened because this broken, beat-up version of himself doesn't have what it takes to bring out even a fraction of the potential Tetsuo carries. He shouts that they need to get to the village fast, but admits he can barely even fly. In a desperate attempt to bring Tetsuo's courage back, Yukio makes it crystal clear that his current body doesn't even reflect 10% of what Tetsuo is capable of. Yukio throws everything into keeping him from giving up. But looking at Tetsuo in that state, he starts thinking something that hurts way too much. Is he the reason Tetsuo never had real friends? Is it possible that, by always being around, he's the one who led Tetsuo into loneliness? On the verge of tears himself, Yukio desperately searches for words that might lift the boy up. And then, Hagane places her hand over Tetsuo's, that brings him back. She's sobbing uncontrollably, saying how terrified she was of dying, how scary it was to think they might lose everything, that it was all way too much for her. And she says she can't even begin to imagine what it must be like for Tetsuo to carry thoughts like that all the time. Tetsuo looks at her, jaw dropped, and hearing those words, he tells himself that he stopped being afraid of kaijus a long time ago. But seeing Hagane's trembling hands, he lets it out and starts crying too. Not from fear, but because he needed it. Yukio even stretches out a mechanical arm to support them both, but feeling like he might be the cause of Tetsuo's loneliness, he decides to stay out of it and pushes the throttle as hard as he can toward the village. That's when an emergency call comes in. Yukio says he doesn't know who it's from. The message is encoded as unknown. He says he'll decrypt it, but when he does, the silence is heavy. The message has nothing good to say. It states that civilization has been wiped out and orders them to run because the kaijus have already reached the center. Tetsuo and Hagane look at each other and pray desperately that everyone is still okay.